Bill Gates helped usher in the digital revolution at Microsoft and has spent the decades since exploring and investing in innovative solutions to some of the world's toughest problems: global poverty, disease, and the coronavirus pandemic, which he spent nearly $2 billion on. Now he's focusing on climate change, agreeing with the overwhelming majority of scientists who warn of a looming climate disaster. The good news is Gates believes it's possible to prevent a catastrophic rise in temperatures. The bad news? He says in the next 30 years, we need scientific breakthroughs, technological innovations, and global cooperation on a scale the world has never seen.
You believe this is the toughest challenge humanity has ever faced?
Absolutely. The amount of change, new ideas, it's way greater than the pandemic, and it needs a level of cooperation that would be unprecedented.
That doesn't sound
No, it's
feasible.
not easy. But hey,
It sounds
we have 30
impossible.
years. We have more educated people than ever. We have a generation that's speaking out on this topic. And, you know, I got to participate in the miracle of the personal computer and the internet. And so, yes, I have a bias to believe innovation can do these things.
He's talking about innovations in every aspect of modern life: manufacturing, agriculture, transportation, because nearly everything we now do releases earth-warming greenhouse gases, mainly carbon dioxide, into the atmosphere. He took us to his favorite burger joint in Seattle to explain.
You're talking about changing everything in the economy. I mean, every aspect.
The
So
physical economy.
of what we can see right now, of us sitting around here, what specifically would be impacted?
Well, this cement would be made in a different way. The steel in the building would be different. You know, the meat in the burger is a big deal. These, you know, all this plastic and paper, potatoes.
With potatoes, you're talking about fertilizer, the irrigation system that's used,
All the tractors, the transport.
trucks that bring them to this restaurant. All that has to change.
Hey, when you're going to zero, you don't get to skip anything.
Gates says going to zero means eliminating all greenhouse gas emissions, or else.
If they wait 100 years to do this,
It's way too late. Then the natural ecosystems will have failed. The instability, the migration, those things will get really, really bad well before the end of the century.
when you're talking about migration, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people trying to move from North Africa to Europe every year.
Exactly. The Syrian war was a 20th of what climate migration will look like. So the deaths per year are 10 times greater than what we've experienced in the pandemic.
In a new book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, Gates outlines all the solutions he believes we need. He says the U.S. has to lead the world getting to zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. He supports President Biden's decision to rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement, but is asking the administration to massively increase the budget for climate and clean energy research to $35 billion a year.
You've said that governments need to do the hard stuff, but not just go after the low-hanging fruit. What's the low-hanging fruit?
Passenger cars, part of the electric generation with renewables, the things everybody knows about, that's getting almost all the money, not the hard parts, which is the industrial piece, including the steel and cement. Those pieces we've hardly started to work on.
No one thinks much about cement and steel, but making it accounts for 16% of all carbon dioxide emissions, and the demand is only growing. The world will add an estimated 2.5 trillion square feet of buildings by 2060. That's the equivalent to putting up another New York City every month for the next 40 years. So one innovative company Gates has been pouring money into is Carbon Cure. They inject captured carbon dioxide into concrete.
What they do is they stick CO2 in here and the cement, and they mix them up. And so you're able to actually get rid of some CO2 by sticking it in the cement. Right now, they get rid of about 5%, but they have a next generation they can get to 30%.
The carbon has been just injected into this, so it's captured it, so it's not going to be released into the atmosphere.
That's right.
Gates has already invested $2 billion of his own money on new green technologies and plans to spend several billion more. In 2016, he also recruited Jeff Bezos, Mike Bloomberg, and nearly 24 other wealthy investors to back a billion-dollar fund called Breakthrough Energy Ventures, making long-term, often risky investments in promising technologies.
It kind of blows my mind, what's the cost of making that stuff?
Gates regularly consults with the fund's team of top scientists and entrepreneurs who've so far invested in 50 companies with cutting-edge ideas to reduce carbon emissions.
What's like the most far-flung idea you've backed?
There's one that's so crazy it's even hard to describe.
Wait a minute. It's so crazy it's hard to describe.
Yeah.
How do you pitch that to investors?
Well, they find geological formations and they just pump water down into them. The energy they've used to pump it in, then they can draw that energy back out. So it's a water pressure storage thing, which, when I first saw it, I thought, that can't work. But
but you gave money to it?
Yeah, lots of money.
Because cows account for around 4% of all greenhouse gases, Gates has invested in 2 companies making plant-based meat substitutes, Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat. But farming the vegetables used to make many meat alternatives emits gases as well. So Gates is also backing a company that's created an entirely new food source.
This company, Nature's Find, is using fungi, and then they turn them into sausage and yogurt. Pretty amazing.
When you say fungi, do you mean like a mushroom or a microbe?
It's a microbe.
The microbe was discovered in the ground in a geyser in Yellowstone National Park. Without soil or fertilizer, it can be grown to produce this nutritional protein that can then be turned into a variety of foods with a small carbon footprint.
This is the yogurt.
Oh, this is good.
Wow.
I've had like cashew yogurt or oat yogurt. It's sort of along those lines.
Yeah, with the burgers, they're, like beyond impossible. They're getting close to the real thing, but you can still tell.
Uh-huh.
These, I'm not sure I could have tell. No, I'm more of a burger expert than I am a yogurt expert.
Uh-huh.
Gates never planned to focus on climate change, but while working in Africa with the foundation he started with his wife Melinda in 2000, he came to see just how vulnerable those in developing countries are to the effects of rising temperatures. So 15 years ago, Gates started educating himself on climate change, bringing scientists and engineers to his office in Seattle for what he calls learning sessions. He also reads voraciously, books and binders full of scientific research.
Yeah, so this is the most recent one, which is about clean hydrogen.
So you're reading thousands of pages every few days on topics.
Yeah, my reading is key, and then asking questions when it doesn't make sense.
Gates isn't just looking to cut future carbon emissions, he's also investing in direct air capture, an experimental process to remove existing CO2 from the atmosphere. Some companies are now using these giant fans to capture CO2 directly out of the air. Gates has become one of the world's largest funders of this kind of technology. But of all his green investments, Gates has spent the most time and money pursuing a breakthrough in nuclear energy, arguing it's key to a zero-carbon future. He says he's a big believer in wind and solar and thinks it can one day provide up to 80% of the country's electricity. But Gates insists, unless we discover an effective way to store and ship wind and solar energy, nuclear power will likely have to do the rest. Energy from nuclear plants can be stored so it's available when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing.
Were you always a big proponent of nuclear?
In 2008, he founded TerraPower, a company that has redesigned a nuclear reactor.
This is your prototype.
Exactly. TerraPower's Natrium reactor. This is a rendering. We haven't built it yet. But here's the nuclear island right here.
This is the reactor.
Exactly. And so all that
Gates says TerraPower's reactor is less expensive to build, produces less waste, and is fully automated, reducing the potential for human error. Gates and Director of Engineering Lindsay Bowles showed us what they say is another key to its safety.
What is it that we're looking at here?
So these individual fuel pins are actually where the uranium fuel is, and that's what generates all the heat in our Natrium reactor.
This is what everybody is worried about.
Yes, exactly.
In a normal reactor, it's water that's flowing past and heating up. And it'll boil and generate a lot of high pressure.
That high heat and pressure can cause an explosion, like in Chernobyl in 1986, when radioactive material was spread for thousands of miles. But Gates says the TerraPower reactor won't use water to cool down the fuel rods. They plan to use liquid sodium.
The liquid sodium can absorb a lot more heat, and so we don't have any high pressure inside the reactor.
In October, the Department of Energy awarded TerraPower $80 million to build one of the first advanced nuclear reactors in the U.S.
Nuclear power can be done in a way that none of those failures of the past would recur because just the physics of how it's built. I admit convincing people of that will be almost as hard as actually building it, but since it may be necessary to avoid climate change, we shouldn't give up.
You've been criticized for being a technocrat, saying technology is the only solution for tackling climate change. There are other people who say, look, the solutions are already there. It's just government policy is what really needs to be focused on.
I wish that was true. I wish all this funding of these companies wasn't necessary at all. Without innovation, we will not solve climate change. We won't even come close.
Gates credits young activists for keeping climate change in the headlines, but he knows some consider him an imperfect ally.
Are you the right messenger on this? Because you fly private planes a lot, and you're creating a lot of greenhouse gases yourself.
Yeah, I probably have one of the highest greenhouse gas footprints of anyone on the planet. You know, my
kind of ironic.
personal flying alone is gigantic. Now, I'm spending quite a bit to buy aviation fuel that was made with plants. You know, I switched to an electric car, I've used solar panels. I'm paying a company that actually, at a very high price, can pull a bit of carbon out of the air and stick it underground. And so I'm offsetting my personal emissions.
Those are called carbon offset.
Right, so, you know, it's costing like $400 a ton, it's like $7 million.
So you're paying $7 million a year to offset your carbon footprint.
Yep.
He's encouraging others who can afford it to buy carbon offsets and green products so that what he calls the green premium, the added production costs for reducing carbon emissions, will go down and quality of products up, driving the innovations that may get us to zero.
It just seems overwhelming if every aspect of our daily life has to change.
It can seem overwhelming.
But you are optimistic.
Yeah, there are days when it looks very hard. If people think it's easy, they're wrong. If people think it's impossible, they're wrong.
It's possible.
It's possible, but it'll be the most amazing thing mankind has ever done.
That's what it has to be.
Yeah, it's an all-out effort, you know, like a world war, but it's us against greenhouse gases.
It's interesting how many big high-tech companies were started by two friends, like Hewlett and Packard, or Google's Larry and Sergey. Microsoft was too. Bill Gates co-founded his company, one of the most important and successful in American history, with his high school buddy, Paul Allen. Today, Allen is known more for his mega yachts and palling around with Brad and Angelina than for his revolutionary ideas in the company's early years. But now, Paul Allen has written a memoir called Idea Man, out this week, in which he not only gives an account of those ideas, he draws a dark portrait of his fellow co-founder and lifelong friend. As Allen writes and tells us in one of the only in-depth interviews he's ever given, he was too angry and proud to tell Gates point blank, quote, "Some days working with you is like being in hell."
You describe Bill Gates in very harsh terms. You describe him as being quite abusive. I mean, it's not a pretty picture.
I felt like when I wrote it, I should just tell it like it happened in an unvarnished way, warts and all.
You know, here he is doing such great work. He's almost a saint now. And it seems like an odd time to write an unflattering portrait of him.
The timing had nothing to do with the many wonderful things that Bill has done. But the timing was because I wanted to see if I could do it and hopefully be alive to see it published.
No wonder he was concerned. When he started the book in 2009, he had stage 4 lymphoma. The book goes back to the beginning. This is a picture of Alan when he was 15 and met a boy at his private school in Seattle, 2 years his junior, named Bill Gates.
There's the machine room. You can see the machine room in there.
This video shows the two buddies revisiting an old computer lab where they used to feed their obsession with programming.
You lift me into one of those huge garbage bins.
Bill and I would actually dive in the dumpsters to try to find listings of the secret inner code of the operating system and try to figure out how it worked. That's how passionate we were.
They both became crack coders, but early on, Alan emerged as a creative dreamer, Gates a cold-eyed pragmatist.
You write that when he was 13 years old, he told you, one day we're going to start a company, run a company.
He was saying, well, imagine what it's like to run a Fortune 500 company. And I'm thinking, I have no idea. You know, my parents were librarians.
You kept bringing him ideas, and you write in the book, he was always popping my balloon.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I would have, 10 ideas, and he would kind of pick them apart one by one.
One of Alan's ideas Gates didn't shoot down would lead to the personal computer revolution and launch Microsoft. It was 1974. He was a college dropout working in Boston, and one day he spotted a magazine announcing a new small computer called the Altair. He ran to show it to his friend Gates, then at Harvard.
I said, here, look at the magazine. This is the computer we've been waiting for.
This is how the PC, the idea that we all have these computers, this is how it started.
Yeah, and it's amazing to think back then, nobody had personal computers. I mean, there were computers in universities and research labs and in corporations, but nobody had personal computers.
Alan's idea was to write software that would enable the Altair to work as well as those large computers.
And so we called up the company that made it and said, well, we can demonstrate this software for you very, very quickly. Are you interested? And they said, sure, if you can really show up and demonstrate it.
Did you have software?
No.
You had nothing.
We had nothing.
So they spent the next 8 weeks at Harvard feverishly writing code, but without an Altair to test on. Alan writes that because Gates looked like he was 13, they decided Alan should go alone to pitch their software. Sitting by an old original Altair, he showed me how he fed the computer a paper strip with their code punched into it and typed print 2 + 2.
And then I hit return, which is the same thing. And lo and behold, it printed 4. And a wave of relief surged over me because I almost couldn't believe it had worked the first time. So that night I called Bill up and I say, Bill, it's unbelievable, it worked. And we were just over the moon.
It was the beginning of the age of a computer in every home, on every desk. Almost overnight, people started buying these small computers, and their software was in high demand. In 1977, Gates was even interviewed on a TV show.
There's a lot of people who are forecasting that there'll be software stores just like there are record stores today, and that there'll be thousands and thousands of those. And I think I'd have to agree with that.
Alan writes that Gates had a rare gift for programming. He was also the shrewder businessman. From the beginning, he demanded a larger share of the company, 60%, and then more. But Alan says he was the one who pushed through the company's big early break, developing an operating system for IBM's first personal computer in 1980. Yet, as the company soared, Alan didn't want to give up his whole life to Microsoft the way Gates did.
Well, I've always had so many different interests.
But do you think he came to think that you weren't working as hard as he was, and it became a source of resentment with him?
Well, I think he was always pushing people to work as hard as they possibly could.
You included.
Maybe me more than everybody else.
You describe Bill in this period, and actually throughout, as tough, a taskmaster. You talk about his yelling, screaming.
There was a lot of yelling.
You guys never understood. You never understood the first thing about this.
A 1994 CBS News profile got a sample of Gates's management style, which Alan describes as browbeating and personal verbal attacks.
That's ridiculous. I'm not doozing this thing. No. Somebody's confused. Somebody's just not thinking. I mean, there's no way.
We'll figure it out.
You had to fight back intensely to stand your ground and make your position and your convictions expressed.
But he didn't like to back down. So these fights would go on, you said. They could go on for hours.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
We're just screaming at each other for hours?
And it's exhausting. It's exhausting, but that was Bill's style.
Alan was miserable and felt he was being marginalized. And then things got a lot worse. He got cancer. One night he passed by Gates's office and overheard him talking with Steve Ballmer, who'd been hired to help run the company.
What were they saying?
They were basically talking about how they were planning to dilute my share down to almost nothing. And it was really a shocking and disheartening moment for me.
And you were sick.
Well, I think I was still probably in the middle of radiation therapy.
He burst in and interrupted them. He says they were trying to cut him out and rip him off.
And of course, Steve came over to my house later that night to apologize.
He did?
He did.
But Bill didn't come.
No, he sent Steve.
He sent Steve. It wasn't Steve. He sent Steve.
Well, Steve's the one who came.
Shortly after, Alan left, but he got to hold on to all his shares. It's hard to feel sorry for him. He was 30, cured of cancer, and owned nearly a third of Microsoft.
So you built this building.
Yeah, this is...
After the company went public, Alan became one of the richest men on Earth, at one point worth an estimated $40 billion. Gates would spend another 2 decades running Microsoft, launching Word, Windows, and Explorer.
Thank you.
And once he retired, he devoted himself to eradicating global disease and improving education. Alan has spent his wealth on a hodgepodge of many interests. For instance, he plays electric guitar, so he has his own personal rock and roll band to jam with. And he bought Jimi Hendrix's Woodstock guitar for $750,000. He likes science fiction. He subsidizes an antenna farm listening for aliens. An avid reader, he showed us a Shakespeare folio he keeps at his estate.
You became the owner of the
Right.
Seahawks.
He likes football. He bought an NFL team. He likes basketball even more. He also bought an NBA team. He's a movie buff, so he invested in DreamWorks, the Hollywood studio. He wants to travel, so he built himself a yacht longer than a football field, equipped with its own submarine. He has spent over $1 billion on philanthropy, including building an institute to study the brain. And like Gates, he's pledged to give most of his money away to charity.
Now, he got married.
Right.
You never got married.
Not yet.
Not yet.
I'm still optimistic. I still believe I'm going to meet somebody, and that's going to happen. But
You want to.
I want to have a family.
But he's often described as a recluse.
Each of them has about...
Something struck me when he showed us his collection of vintage warplanes.
I get this Howard Hughesy feel with the planes, Hollywood. Do you think about that ever?
Well, I hope I don't end up in a cinema by myself watching I Station Zebra over and over again. I think I've got such a diverse set of interests: movies, aviation, technology,
Howard
sports
Hughes.
teams. Well, I don't know if Howard was involved in sports teams, but
Alan's diverse set of interests also led him to invest in over 100 business ventures. Most of them were poorly managed or ahead of their time, so they flopped. And he slid from being the third richest man in the world to 57th.
Were you just too early? Or was it that you really needed a Bill Gates and didn't have that other person to push it through?
look, at the Microsoft days, you had some great ideas and some great execution between me and Bill and many other people. You know, in technology, most things fail. Most companies fail. But I had some whoppers.
Some of his whoppers, however, produced numerous patents. Last year, in a move that angered Silicon Valley, Alan sued several giant companies, accusing them of infringing on those old patents.
Who were you suing?
Oh, it's a long list.
AOL, Apple, eBay, Facebook, Google, Netflix, Office Depot, Office Max, Staples, Yahoo, and YouTube.
Right.
How do you argue that you had something to do with Google? It just seems so outlandish or kind of wacky.
Look, Microsoft and Google, all these people have patents of their own. They all enforce patents. They all charge other companies for patents. And all I'm trying to do is get back the investment that I made to create these patents.
We kept hearing that what he's really trying to do is gain recognition as a tech visionary. But with his book, Idea Man, he's being branded a bitter billionaire.
What's your reaction to people saying it's kind of a revenge book, a bitter book?
It's not about that. I just felt like it's an important piece of technology history, and I should tell it like it happened, and I hope people understand and respect that.
But for all the bad feelings Alan writes about with Gates, near the end of the book he reveals something that happened when he got cancer a second time in 2009.
And
Right.
he came to see you, he comforted you when you were sick.
Right. Bill came, here to my house multiple times, and we had some great talks. And there's a bond there that can't be denied, and I think we both feel that.
Even after the book? I know he's read the book.
Right. No, I'm sure at some point we'll sit down and talk about the book, which we haven't done yet.
You'll have a screaming match.
Well, I don't know about screaming, but I'm sure it'll be a heated discussion.
Do you think there's any reason that you're going to have to apologize to him now?
I don't think so.
We asked Bill Gates for a comment, and while he declined, he has said that the founding of Microsoft was an equal partnership, and Paul deserves more credit than he's often given.
This past week, the Federal Trade Commission was asked to investigate the data collected by Google on its Android operating system, which powers most of the world's smartphones. It was a tiny blip in the news cycle, but another sign of Washington's and Europe's growing concerns about the enormous, largely unchecked power accumulated by tech giants like Facebook, Amazon, and Google over the last 2 decades. Of the three, Google, which is part of a holding company called Alphabet, is the most powerful, intriguing, and omnipresent in our lives. This is how it came to be. Most people love Google. It's changed our world, insinuated itself in our lives, made itself indispensable. You probably don't even have to type google.com into your computer. It's often the default setting, a competitive advantage Google paid billions of dollars for. No worry, Google is worth more than $750 billion right now, and you don't get that big by accident. Since going public in 2004, Google has acquired more than 200 companies, expanding its reach across the internet. It bought YouTube, the biggest video platform. It bought Android, the operating system that runs 80% of the world's smartphones. And it bought DoubleClick, which distributes much of the world's digital advertising. All of this barely raising an eyebrow with regulators in Washington.
Were any of those acquisitions questioned by the antitrust division of the Justice Department?
Some were investigated, but only superficially. The government just really isn't enforcing our antitrust laws, and that's what's happened. None of these acquisitions have been challenged.
Gary Reebok is one of the most prominent antitrust lawyers in the country, widely credited with persuading the Justice Department to sue Microsoft back in the 90s, the last major antitrust case against big tech. Now, he's battling Google.
You think Google's a monopoly?
Oh, yes, of course, Google's a monopoly. In fact, they're a monopoly in several markets. They're a monopoly in search. They're a monopoly in search advertising.
Those technologies are less than 25 years old and may seem small compared to the industrial monopolies like railroads and Standard Oil a century ago. But Reebok says there's nothing small about Google.
Google makes the internet work. The internet would not be accessible to us without a search engine.
And they control it.
They control access to it. That's the important part. Google is the gatekeeper for the World Wide Web, for the internet as we know it. It's every bit as important today as petroleum was when John D. Rockefeller was monopolizing that.
Last year, Google conducted 90% of the world's internet searches. When billions of people asked trillions of questions, it was Google that provided the answers, using computer algorithms known only to Google.
They have this phrase they use, competition is just a click away. They have no competition. Bing, their competition, has 2% of the market. They have 90%.
Jonathan Taplin is a digital media expert and director emeritus of the Annenberg Innovation Lab at the University of Southern California. He says Google's expertise may be technology, but its business is advertising. And its most valuable commodity is highly specialized information about us. It's helped Google control roughly 60% of worldwide advertising revenue on the internet. Taplin says traditional companies can't compete because they don't have the data.
They know who you are, where you are, what you just bought, what you might want to buy. And so if I'm an advertiser and I say, I want 24-year-old women in Nashville, Tennessee, who drive trucks and drink bourbon, I can do that on Google.
People tell their search engines things they wouldn't even tell their wives. I mean, it's a very powerful and yet very intimate technology, and that gives the company that controls it a mind-boggling degree of control over our entire society.
Google is so dominant in search and search advertising that analysts and venture capitalists in Silicon Valley say it's extremely difficult for startups to get funding if their business model requires them to compete with Google for ad revenue. Jeremy Stoppelman co-founded Yelp more than a decade ago, a website that collects local reviews on everything from auto mechanics to restaurants nationwide and makes money selling ads.
The initial promise of Google was to organize the world's information, and ultimately that manifested itself in you expecting that the top links, the things that it shows at the top of that page, are the best from around the web, the best that the world has to offer. And I can tell you that is not the case. That is not the case anymore.
Instead of doing what's best for consumers, Stoppelman says Google is doing what's best for Google.
If I were starting out today, I would have no shot of building Yelp. That opportunity has been closed off by Google and their approach.
In what way?
Because if you provide great content in one of these categories that is lucrative to Google and seen as potentially threatening, they will snuff you out.
What do you mean snuff you out?
They will make you disappear. They will bury you.
Yelp and countless other sites depend on Google to bring them web traffic, eyeballs for their advertisers. But now Stoppelman says their biggest competitor in the most lucrative markets is Google. He says it's collecting and bundling its own information on things like shopping and travel and putting it at the very top of the search results, regardless of whether it belongs there on merit.
So let's start off with sushi.
He showed us how it worked by Googling sushi San Francisco.
All the prime real estate is here. This is where the consumer, their eye focuses. And that's by design. Google wants you to pay attention to their content.
All of the information here is owned by Google, from the maps to the reviews. Stoppelman says if you click on any of these links at the top of the page, you may think you've gone to another website. But in fact, you will still be on Google, seeing what it wants you to see while it collects your personal information and maybe exposes you to Google advertising.
If you click anything inside this box, you stay on Google and they make more money.
That's right.
Google told us it doesn't have anything to do with money. It's about improving its product by making searches quicker and easier for its customers, by eliminating the need to click through lots of other sites. Stoppelman says it's about stifling competition, pushing it down the page where it's less likely to be seen. The advantage, he says, is even more striking if you look at the search results on a smartphone.
This is exactly what your phone would look like in the palm of your hand. This is all of Google's own property right here. It takes up the entire screen.
How important is that first page?
It's not even just the first page, it's the first few links on the page is the vast majority of where user attention goes and where the traffic flows.
So if you're not at the top of the page or the bottom of the first page or on the second page, that's going to affect your business.
Yeah, if you're on the second page, forget it. You're not a real business.
Yelp, Microsoft, Amazon, eBay, Expedia, and Yahoo all complained about Google's dominance in what they called its anti-competitive behavior to the Federal Trade Commission, which in 2011 conducted an investigation. According to this confidential memo, parts of which were inadvertently given to the Wall Street Journal years later, the FTC's Bureau of Competition had recommended that an antitrust lawsuit be filed against Google for some of its business practices. It said Google is in the unique position of being able to make or break any web-based business and has strengthened its monopolies over search and search advertising through anti-competitive means and forestalled competitors and would-be competitors' ability to challenge those monopolies. It specifically cited Google for stealing competitors' content and imposing restrictions on advertisers and other websites that limited their ability to utilize other search engines. But the recommendations were rejected.
It flatly says that Google's conduct was anti-competitive. It flatly says that Google's conduct hurt consumers. I mean, what else would you need to know to vote out a complaint? There it is, written by your own staff, and yet nothing happened.
They closed the case.
They closed the case. Correct.
The FTC's commissioners decided that Google's conduct could be addressed with voluntary improvements to some of its business practices, and that Google's decision to move its own products to the top of the search page could plausibly be of benefit to consumers. But Reebok and others who were directly involved in the investigation have long suspected that the outcome had something to do with Google's political muscle in Washington and its close relationship with the Obama administration. Google spent more money on lobbying last year than any other corporation, employing 25 different firms and helping fund 300 trade associations, think tanks, and other groups, many of which influence policy.
They have a seat at the table in every discussion that implicates this issue at all. They know about developments that we never even hear about. So their influence, from my perspective, is very, very difficult to challenge.
Right now, the only one taking aggressive action against Google and the power of big tech is Margaret Vestager, the competition commissioner for the European Union. During her 4 years in office, Vestager has become a thorn in the side of Silicon Valley, fining Facebook $122 million for a merger violation and ordering Ireland to recover $15 billion in taxes owed by Apple. Last summer, she levied a record $2.7 billion fine against Google for depriving certain competitors of a chance to compete with them.
Just as well as I admire some of the innovation by Google over the last decade, well, I want their illegal behavior to stop.
And that's what you feel has gone on.
Not only do we feel it, we mean that we can prove it.
In researching the case, Vestager says her staff went through 1.7 billion Google search queries and found that Google was manipulating its secret search formulas, or algorithms, to promote its own products and services and sending its competitors into oblivion.
It's very difficult to find the rivals because on average you'd find them only on page 4 in your search results.
And why so far down?
Well, because then you don't find them. I don't know anyone who goes to page 4 on their search result. Jokingly, you could say that this is where you should keep your secrets because no one ever comes there.
Do you think this has been deliberate on Google's part?
Yes, we think that this is done on purpose.
How do they do it? I mean, I think everybody has this idea that Google has this algorithm and they put the best searches right at the top.
Well, it is exactly the algorithm that does it, both the promotion of Google themselves and the demotion of others.
So they're rigging the game.
Yes, and it is illegal.
Google has paid its $2.7 billion fine and is aggressively appealing the decision. But for now, Stoppelman says everyone is still playing by Google's rules.
If you're in business, you have to be on Google.
Yeah, Google wields enormous power across the industry, and they set the rules. The question is, who's watching Google?
Google declined our request for an interview with one of its executives for this story, but in a written response to our questions, the company denied it was a monopoly in search or search advertising, citing many competitors, including Amazon and Facebook. It says it does not make changes to its algorithm to disadvantage competitors, and that, quote, our responsibility is to deliver the best results possible to our users, not specific placements for sites within our results. We understand that those sites whose ranking falls will be unhappy and may complain publicly.
Have you ever wondered if all those people you see staring intently at their smartphones nearly everywhere and at all times are addicted to them? According to a former Google product manager you're about to hear from, Silicon Valley is engineering your phone, apps, and social media to get you hooked. As we first reported in April, he's one of the few tech insiders to publicly acknowledge that the companies responsible for programming your phones are working hard to get you to feel the need to check in constantly. Some programmers call it brain hacking, and the tech world would probably prefer you didn't hear about it. But Tristan Harris openly questions the long-term consequences of it all, and we think it's worth putting down your phone to listen.
This thing is a slot machine.
How's that a slot machine?
Well, every time I check my phone, I'm playing the slot machine to see what did I get. This is one way to hijack people's minds and create a habit, to form a habit. What you do is you make it so when someone pulls a lever, sometimes they get a reward, an exciting reward. And it turns out that this design technique can be embedded inside of all these products.
The rewards Harris is talking about are a big part of what makes smartphones so appealing. The chance of getting likes on Facebook and Instagram, cute emojis in text messages, and new followers on Twitter.
There's a whole playbook of techniques that get used to get you using the product for as long as possible.
Yeah, what kind of techniques are used?
So Snapchat's the most popular messaging service for teenagers, and they invented this feature called Streaks, which shows the number of days in a row that you've sent a message back and forth with someone. So now you can say, well, what's the big deal here? Well, the problem is that kids feel like, well, now I don't want to lose my streak. But it turns out that kids actually, when they go on vacation, are so stressed about their streak that they actually give their password to like 5 other kids to keep their streaks going on their behalf. And so you could ask, when these features are being designed, are they designed to most help people live their life? Or are they being designed because they're best at hooking people into using the product?
Is Silicon Valley programming apps, or are they programming people?
Inadvertently, whether they want to or not, they're shaping the thoughts and feelings and actions of people. They are programming people. There's always this narrative that technology is neutral and it's up to us to choose how we use it. This is just not true.
Technology is not neutral.
It's not neutral. They want you to use it in particular ways and for long periods of time because that's how they make their money.
It's rare for a tech insider to be so blunt, but Tristan Harris believes someone needs to be. A few years ago, he was living the Silicon Valley dream. He dropped out of a master's program at Stanford University to start a software company. 4 years later, Google bought him out and hired him as a product manager. It was while working there, he started to feel overwhelmed.
Honestly, I was just bombarded in email and calendar invitations and just the overload of what it's like to work at a place like Google. And I was asking, when is all of this adding up to like an actual benefit to my life? And I ended up making this presentation. It was kind of a manifesto. And it basically said, you know, look, never before in history have a handful of people at a handful of technology companies shaped how 1 billion people think and feel every day with the choices they make about these screens.
His 144-page presentation argued that the constant distractions of apps and emails are weakening our relationships to each other and destroying our kids' ability to focus. It was widely read inside Google and caught the eye of one of the founders, Larry Page. But Harris told us it didn't lead to any changes, and after 3 years, he quit.
And it's not because anyone is evil or has bad intentions, it's because the game is getting attention at all costs. And the problem is it becomes this race to the bottom of the brainstem, where if I go lower on the brainstem to get you, using my product, I win, but it doesn't end up in the world we want to live in. We don't end up feeling good about how we're using all this stuff.
You call this a race to the bottom of the brainstem. It's a race to the most primitive emotions we have: fear, anxiety, loneliness, all these things.
Absolutely, and that's again because in the race for attention, I have to do whatever works.
It absolutely wants one thing, which is your attention.
Now he travels the country trying to convince programmers and anyone else who will listen that the business model of tech companies needs to change. He wants products designed to make the best use of our time, not just grab our attention.
Do you think parents understand the complexities of what their kids are dealing with when they're dealing with their phones, dealing with apps and social media?
No, and I think this is really important because there's a narrative that, I guess they're just doing this like we used to gossip on the phone. But what this misses is that your telephone in the 1970s didn't have 1,000 engineers on the other side of the telephone who were redesigning it to work with other telephones and then updating the way your telephone worked every day to be more and more persuasive. That was not true in the 1970s.
How many Silicon Valley insiders are there speaking out like you are?
Not that many.
We reached out to the biggest tech firms, but none would speak on the record, and some didn't even return our phone call. Most tech companies say their priority is improving user experience, something they call engagement, but they remain secretive about what they do to keep people glued to their screens. So we went to Venice, California, where the bodybuilders on the beach are being muscled out by small companies that specialize in what Ramsey Brown calls brain hacking.
A computer programmer who now understands how the brain works knows how to write code that will get the brain to do certain things. Yes, it is.
Ramsey Brown studied neuroscience before co-founding Dopamine Labs, a startup crammed into a garage. The company is named after the dopamine molecule in our brains that aids in the creation of desire and pleasure. Brown and his colleagues write computer code for apps used by fitness companies and financial firms. The programs are designed to provoke a neurological response.
You're trying to figure out how to get people coming back.
When should I make you feel a little extra awesome to get you to come back into the app longer?
The computer code he creates finds the best moments to give you one of those rewards, which have no actual value. But Brown says trigger your brain to make you want more. For example, on Instagram, he told us sometimes those likes come in a sudden rush.
There's holding some of them back for you to let you know later in a big burst. Like, hey, here's the 30 likes we didn't mention from a little while ago.
So all of a sudden you get a big burst of likes.
Yeah, but why that moment? There's some algorithm somewhere that predicted, hey, for this user right now, who's experimental subject 79B3 and experiment 231, we think we can see an improvement in his behavior if you give it to him in this burst instead of that burst.
When Brown says experiments, he's talking generally about the millions of computer calculations being used every moment by his company and others to constantly tweak your online experience and make you come back for more.
You're a part of a controlled set of experiments that are happening in real time across you and millions of other people.
We're guinea pigs.
You're guinea pigs. You're guinea pigs in the box, pushing the button and sometimes getting the likes. And they're doing this to keep you in there.
The longer we look at our screens, the more data companies collect about us and the more ads we see. Ad spending on social media has doubled in just 2 years to more than $31 billion.
You don't pay for Facebook. Advertisers pay for Facebook. You get to use it for free because your eyeballs are what's being sold there. So
that's an interesting way to look at that you're not the customer for Facebook.
You're not the customer. You don't send a check to Facebook, but Coca-Cola does.
Brown says there's a reason texts and Facebook use a continuous scroll, because it's a proven way to keep you searching longer.
You spend half your time on Facebook just scrolling to find one good piece worth looking at. It's happening because they are engineered to become addictive.
You're almost saying like there's an addiction code.
Yeah, that is the case. Since we've figured out, to some extent, how these pieces of the brain that handle addiction are working, people have figured out how to juice them further and how to bake that information into apps.
Dinner table could be a technology-free zone.
While Brown is tapping into the power of dopamine, psychologist Larry Rosen and his team at California State University Dominguez Hills are researching the effect technology has on our anxiety levels.
We're looking at the impact of technology through the brain.
Rosen told us when you put your phone down, your brain signals your adrenal gland to produce a burst of a hormone called cortisol, which has an evolutionary purpose. Cortisol triggers a fight or flight response to danger.
How does cortisol relate to a mobile device, a phone?
What we find is the typical person checks their phone every 15 minutes or less, and half of the time they check their phone, there's no alert, no notification. It's coming from inside their head telling them, gee, I haven't checked in Facebook in a while. I haven't checked on this Twitter feed for a while. I wonder if somebody commented on my Instagram post. That then generates cortisol, and it starts to make you anxious, and eventually your goal is to get rid of that anxiety, so you check in.
So the same hormone that made primitive man anxious and hyper-aware of his surroundings to keep him from being eaten by lions is today compelling Rosen's students, and all of us, to continually peek at our phones to relieve our anxiety.
When you put the phone down, you don't shut off your brain. You just put the phone down.
Can I be honest with you right now? I haven't paid attention to what you're saying because I just realized my phone is right down by my right foot, and I haven't checked it in like 10 minutes.
And it makes you anxious.
I'm a little anxious.
Yes.
We found out just how anxious in this experiment conducted by Rosen's research colleague, Nancy Cheever.
So the first thing I'm going to do is apply these electrodes to your fingers.
While I watched a video, a computer tracked minute changes in my heart rate and perspiration. What I didn't know was that Cheever was sending text messages to my phone, which was just out of reach. Every time a text notification went off, the blue line spiked, indicating anxiety caused in part by the release of cortisol.
Oh, that one is, yeah, that's a huge spike right there.
Right here.
And if you can imagine what that's doing to your body, every time you get a text message, you probably can't even feel it, right? Because it's such a, it's a small amount of arousal.
That's fascinating.
Their research suggests our phones are keeping us in a continual state of anxiety, in which the only antidote is the phone.
Is it known what the impact of all this technology use is?
Absolutely not.
It's too soon.
We're all part of this big experiment.
What is this doing to a young mind, a teenager?
Well, there's some projects going on where they're actually scanning teenagers' brains over a 20-year period and looking to see what kind of changes they're finding.
Here's the reality. Corporations and creators of content have, since the beginning of time, wanted to make their content as engaging as possible.
Gabe Zickerman has worked with dozens of companies, including Apple and CBS, to make their online products more irresistible. He's best known in Silicon Valley for his expertise in something called gamification, using techniques from video games to insert fun and competition into almost everything on your smartphone.
So one of the interesting things about gamification and other engaging technologies is at the same time as we can argue that the neuroscience is being used to create dependent behavior, those same techniques are being used to get people to work out, using their Fitbit. So all of these technologies, all of the techniques for engagement can be used for good or can be used for bad.
Zickerman is now working on software called Onward, designed to break users' bad habits. It'll track a person's activity and can recommend they do something else when they're spending too much time online.
I think creators have to be liberated to make their content as good as possible.
The idea that a tech company is not going to try to make their product as persuasive, as engaging as possible, you're just saying that's not going to happen.
Asking tech companies, asking content creators to be less good at what they do feels like a ridiculous ask. It feels impossible. And also, it's very anti-capitalistic. This isn't the system that we live in.
Ramsey Brown and his garage startup Dopamine Labs made a habit-breaking app as well. It's called Space, and it creates a 12-second delay, what Brown calls a moment of zen before any social media app launches. In January, he tried to convince Apple to sell it in their App Store.
And they rejected it from the App Store because they told us any app that would encourage people to use other apps or their iPhone less was unacceptable for distribution in the App Store.
They actually said that to you?
They said that to us. They did not want us to give out this thing that was going to make people less stuck on their phones.
A few days after our story first aired, Apple called to tell us it had a change of heart and made Space available in its App Store.